Okay, let's just take a second to think about something we all do every single day. We wake up, we go about our business, and we often take our bodies and honestly, the plants and animals all around us completely for granted. We really do. But beneath the surface, hidden away from the naked eye, there is an extraordinarily complex, highly coordinated biological factory working around the clock, literally 24/7, just to keep the lights on. Today, we're going to dive deep into this. We are going to explore the core life processes that make our very existence possible. Welcome to The Explainer.
So let's start with a massive question. Have you ever wondered what fundamentally separates the living from the non-living? I mean, what is the ultimate deciding factor? We might initially think, well, it's breathing, right? Or maybe a heartbeat. But if you look at a dormant seed, it doesn't have a heartbeat, yet it's absolutely alive. So the true bottom line, the ultimate deciding factor is movement. And I don't just mean a cheetah sprinting across the savanna or a bird flying through the air. I'm talking about the invisible, continuous molecular movements happening right now at this exact second inside your cells. All living things move without external help. It's these hidden molecular movements inside our tissues and cells that are absolutely 100% necessary to maintain all life processes. If that molecular movement stops, life stops. It's that simple.
To maintain that vital molecular movement, our biological factory relies on four essential, completely interconnected departments. We're looking at nutrition, respiration, transportation, and finally, excretion. Let's kick things off with Department 1, nutrition. This is all about fueling the machine. Every factory needs raw materials, right? To run the operation, to build the body, to repair damaged parts. Organisms desperately need carbon-based raw materials. Now, looking at the biological world, there are essentially two main strategies for acquiring this fuel. On one side of the spectrum, you have autotrophic nutrition. This is the ultimate biological self-reliance. Plants fall into this category. They use carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight to literally manufacture their own food. They don't need to eat anyone else. They just build their fuel from scratch. On the completely opposite side, you have heterotrophic nutrition. This is where organisms, like animals and fungi, simply must get their food from the outside. We are the consumers. And heterotrophs have a few really fascinating ways of pulling this off. They can be saprophytic, which means they break down dead material outside their bodies and absorb the nutrients. Think of a mushroom growing on a fallen log. They can be parasitic, like a tick or a leech, basically freeloading and stealing nutrients from a living host. Or they can be holozoic. That's us. Humans are holozoic, meaning we take the whole food directly inside our bodies to break it down internally. Let's actually zoom in on that human digestive conveyor belt for a second. It is a highly structured, multi-step process where very specific chemical workers systematically break down your lunch into usable fuel. It all starts the second food hits your mouth. Your teeth physically break the food into smaller chunks, but chemically, an enzyme called salivary amylase immediately begins turning starches into sugar. Have you ever noticed bread tasting sweeter the longer you chew it? That's amylase at work. Next, the food drops into the stomach. And guys, the stomach is intense. Here, gastric juices contain hydrochloric acid, creating an environment so acidic it could literally dissolve metal. It's wild to think that's sloshing around inside you. Thankfully, your body is smart. A thick layer of mucus carefully protects your stomach walls from digesting themselves, all while the enzyme pepsin gets to work dismantling proteins. From there, the mixture moves into the upper small intestine. This is where bile from the liver swoops in to break down stubborn fats, and pancreatic juices finish dismantling whatever proteins and fats are left. Finally, we get to the absorption phase. The walls of the small intestine are lined with millions of tiny finger-like projections called villi. These villi are incredible. They greatly increase the surface area so all that newly digested food can be rapidly absorbed directly into your bloodstream. Whatever is left over gets passed to the large intestine, which simply absorbs the remaining water, packing up the rest for waste. Which brings us to Department 2, respiration. This is where we go from just having fuel to actually unlocking the energy. Because here's the thing, just having fuel sitting around in your blood isn't enough. The factory needs to burn it to generate actual usable power. That entire process is what we call respiration. The energy released from burning that fuel is used to create a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. I want you to think of ATP as the cellular energy currency. You can't just pay a cell with a piece of a sandwich. You have to convert it into ATP first. It's basically a tiny rechargeable biological battery. When your cells need power to do literally anything, including the exact energy your brain is using to process this explainer right now, they break that ATP back down with water, releasing that stored energy. It is the ultimate biological currency driving everything you do. Now, what's truly fascinating here is how beautifully organisms adapt to different environmental conditions when making this ATP. The standard, most efficient process is aerobic respiration. Aerobic means with oxygen. In the presence of oxygen, glucose is broken down into a substance called pyruvate in the cytoplasm, and then it is fully dismantled inside the mitochondria. This produces carbon dioxide, water, and massive, massive amounts of energy. But what if oxygen simply isn't available? Say you're sprinting for a bus, right? Your body can temporarily switch to a backup generator called anaerobic respiration. Without oxygen in your muscle cells, that glucose gets turned into lactic acid, and it releases much, much less energy. This buildup of lactic acid is the exact reason why your muscles start burning when you push them too hard. Meanwhile, other organisms out there use anaerobic respiration natively. Yeast, for example, breaks down glucose without oxygen to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. We call that fermentation, and it's the exact biological party trick responsible for baking bread and brewing beer. But to get that crucial oxygen to your mitochondria in the first place for aerobic respiration, air has to travel down a very specific branching pathway. When we breathe in, our diaphragm contracts, our chest expands, and we pull air through the nostrils. Here, tiny hairs and mucus trap incoming dust. The air travels down the trachea or windpipe, and fun fact, the trachea has rigid rings of cartilage around it, specifically so it doesn't collapse on itself like a cheap flat straw when you inhale. From there, the pathway branches into two bronchi, then into even smaller tubes called bronchioles, until it finally reaches the end of the line, tiny microscopic air sacs called alveoli. The alveoli are the star of the show here. They provide such a massive surface area for gas exchange that if you were to lay out all the alveoli in your lungs flat, they would cover an entire tennis court. Think about that, all crammed inside your chest. This massive surface area is what allows the vital exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide with our blood to happen in a split second. Okay, moving right along to Department 3, transportation. This is the biological delivery system. So now that we have perfectly processed nutrients from the gut and fresh oxygen from the lungs, we need to distribute them to trillions of cells, enter the bloodstream. But blood isn't just a simple liquid. It is a highly complex transport river made of 4 very specific elements, each carrying out a unique vital task. First, the fluid part of the river itself is called plasma. Plasma acts as the current, physically carrying dissolved food, water, carbon dioxide, and nitrogenous waste. Floating down this plasma river are the red blood cells. They are your dedicated cargo ships, with the sole, specific job of carrying oxygen. Then you have the factory's internal security team, the white blood cells. They are constantly patrolling, seeking out and killing harmful microbes. Finally, we have the emergency maintenance crew, the platelets. If you get a cut, platelets rush to the scene to clot the blood, preventing you from leaking vital fluid. And I should mention, we actually have a secondary parallel system running alongside our blood, called lymph. Lymph is a fluid containing lymphocytes that drains excess fluid from our tissues, transports digested fats, and acts as a massive secondary defense grid against germs. Driving this entire massive fluid highway is, of course, the heart engine. In mammals and birds, the heart features 4 distinct chambers, and this is a truly brilliant piece of evolutionary design. A thick muscular wall called a septum completely separates the right and left sides of the heart. Why? To strictly, efficiently separate the fresh oxygenated blood coming from the lungs from the depleted, deoxygenated blood returning from the body. Because mammals and birds use a huge amount of energy to maintain a constant warm body temperature, they demand a highly efficient, pure oxygen supply. There's no room for mixed blood here. This creates a double circulation system, meaning blood flows through the heart twice in one complete cycle. Once to the lungs, back to the heart, then out to the body. By contrast, if you look at amphibians and reptiles, they only have a 3-chambered heart. They mix their oxygenated and deoxygenated blood a bit, but that's perfectly fine for them, as their body temperature simply matches their environment, so they don't need the crazy high energy output we do. And fishes, they operate on a brilliantly simple, single-loop, 2-chambered heart. Now, let's look at plants for a second and see how they build a completely different kind of transport system. Obviously, plants don't have a heart pumping away inside the trunk. So to move things around, they use 2 completely separate, dedicated pipeline systems. The first is the xylem. The xylem specifically transports water and dissolved minerals upwards from the roots. And it works by utilizing a passive suction force created by a process called transpiration. Transpiration is simply the evaporation of water from the leaves. As water evaporates out the top, it creates a vacuum that pulls more water up from the bottom. Think of it exactly like drinking through a giant biological straw. The second pipeline is the phloem. The phloem's job is to transport the food, the sugars produced by photosynthesis in the leaves, downwards and outwards to the rest of the plant.
But unlike the passive, evaporative suction of the xylem, the phloem has to work for it. It actively spends ATP energy to create osmotic pressure, literally pushing the food forcefully to wherever it's needed in the plant's roots or growing stems.
And finally, we arrive at Department 4, excretion, the crucial business of waste management. Every factory, no matter how efficient, produces byproducts. And if those toxic byproducts build up, the whole factory shuts down. In humans, our central waste management facilities are the kidneys. Inside each kidney are millions, literally millions, of microscopic filtration units called nephrons. They are absolute biological marvels. Blood loaded with toxic nitrogenous waste, like ammonia, urea, and uric acid, gets pushed in via the renal artery. Inside the nephron, there's a tiny cup-like structure called the Bowman's capsule, and nestled inside that cup is a tightly wound bundle of capillaries known as the glomerulus. Right here at the glomerulus, the blood is meticulously, rigorously filtered under high pressure. The toxic waste, along with excess water and salts, gets squeezed out and passes into a collecting duct to eventually become urine. But the nephron is incredibly smart. It doesn't just throw everything away. As the fluid travels down the nephron's tubes, it actively reabsorbs the useful stuff, like stray glucose and amino acids, pulling them right back into your bloodstream so absolutely nothing valuable is lost. It's a masterclass in recycling.
Plants, on the other hand, don't have kidneys, but they still make waste, so they've evolved their own, frankly, very clever and pragmatic waste management strategies. For gaseous waste, like the oxygen they produce during photosynthesis or the carbon dioxide from their own respiration, they just vent it straight out into the air through tiny pores in their leaves called stomata. Excess water is also simply vaporized out of those same stomata via transpiration. But what about solid or chemical wastes? This is my favorite part. Plants will often just pack these toxic chemical wastes into an old leaf, wait for the leaf to dry up, and then simply let it fall off the branch. It is a wonderfully simple evolutionary solution. Just bag up the trash and drop it. They also pack metabolic byproducts into large cellular vacuoles, push waste out into the surrounding soil through their roots, or they'll store things like resins and gums deep inside old, unused, dead xylem tissues, which is exactly where we get things like sap and natural rubber.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to take a moment and consider the sheer magnitude of what's happening right now. These 4 incredibly complex, interdependent systems: nutrition fueling the factory, respiration unlocking the battery power, transportation delivering the goods via a massive highway, and excretion meticulously taking out the trash. They are all seamlessly operating inside you right at this very second. Trillions of individual cells and microscopic molecular machines are keeping you alive. They are maintaining those vital molecular movements we talked about at the very beginning. And they are doing it entirely without you having to spare a single conscious thought. It is the ultimate autopilot. So the next time you look in the mirror, or even just look at a tree outside your window, ask yourself, what other invisible miracles are operating in the background of our world right now, just waiting to be understood? Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.